Who are the most overrated NFL players in the game today? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch back here with another NFL video. You wanted it? You got it. The most overrated player for all 32 teams. That's right. Every NFL team's most overrated player entering the 2024 NFL season. If you missed my video on the most underrated player for every team, where I was more positive about each and every team, make sure to check that out. And if you want the breakout player for all 32 teams entering the 2024 NFL season, who will break out on your favorite team, let's get 100 likes on this video and you will receive your breakout player. Now, when it comes to overrated players in the NFL today, these are simply players that the public perception, for whatever reason, their past history of production, they've gotten older, they've regressed, fantasy football, their draft status, their contract, for whatever reason, the public, the NFL fandom, believes this player is much better than the actual value of them playing on Sundays for your favorite team. That's an overrated player in my book. Now, let me know in the comments if you agree with my choice for all 32 teams, especially for your team. I want to hear from the fans out there. Do you believe that I'm right with my choice for the overrated player for your favorite team? Let's go. Let's go in alphabetical order, beginning with the Arizona Cardinals. And I didn't say these weren't going to be controversial and these weren't going to sting. And people are going to dislike this video, right? So if you do enjoy this video, Gronk spike the like button. Kyler Murray is my most overrated player on the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I'm not saying that Kyler Murray is not talented. I'm not saying that Kyler Murray, at his best, is not a very good quarterback. But even then, I believe that Kyler Murray has been overrated. First of all, he was a first overall pick. And then you kind of look at the production and you look at what he's done in the NFL from 1,000 feet away, and you're a little bit underwhelmed with the overall results so far. Kyler Murray is 6-13 as a starting quarterback over the last 2 seasons. That includes games that he's missed due to injury. He had under 7 yards per attempt last season, a 24-12 touchdown to interception ratio, and below a 90 passer rating. That's in those last 19 games where he is 6-13. Pretty below average numbers in terms of what we expect from Kyler Murray. A guy that at one time, I would say 2021, was a top 10 quarterback, or at least considered a top 10 quarterback. And I would certainly give you that in 2021, Kyler Murray was a top 10 quarterback. When you actually look at the rest of his career, he's been maybe average at best for a majority of his career. And he does have flaws. Despite having a strong arm, a multitude of ways to deliver the football, probably the quickest feet in football at the position of quarterback, a really good scramble ability, a really good game sense, has great qualities. He also has really crippling qualities. First of all, he's really small. And that can lead him to be a little soft at times. His play from the pocket is not the greatest, because he does not work the middle of the field at a high level or even an above average level. I would call it well below average. I would say that his ability to get rattled within games is pretty frequent against good opponents and tough defenses. You ever notice that certain teams just really can wrap up Kyler Murray and give him issues? Typically, those are the best teams and the best defenses, as we saw in that playoff game against the Rams in 2021. Kyler looked like a bad quarterback in that game. And teams have been able to throw at different game plans to be able to corral him in the pocket and make him that pocket passer and make him step into throws and take hits. And he's just simply not the same player at times. So does Kyler possess great talent and highlight reel at times plays, yes. But the inconsistency, the injuries as of late, the production as of late, the lack of winning as of late, although the team is diminished around him, a lot of that comes down to the quarterback. And if you are a top 10 quarterback or a talent that we believe can be that, you have to overcome. You have to lead. And Kyler has had some issues about potentially his leadership, his work ethic. Those have been concerns. So I would say that Kyler, on a team that overall is in no way, shape, or form overrated, they don't have a lot of overrated players, I would call Kyler Murray the most overrated on the Cardinals. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons is clearly Kyle Pitts. Now, at this point, Kyle Pitts has become almost a frustration hate for many people, and maybe even including myself, to the point where I believed in Kyle Pitts early in his career. He has an 1,000-yard season as a rookie, and then since then, he's pretty much disappeared. And this also comes from a fantasy viewpoint, and I think it puts it into good perspective to really understand how much Kyle Pitts has really disappointed. This tight end was the 4th overall pick in his draft class. He's played now 3 seasons in the NFL. One was pretty good for a rookie, right? A 1,000-yard season is pretty special. But then again, year 2 was horrible for that standard. And year 3 was a bit better, but still not anywhere near where he should be in terms of a generational receiving tight end talent. A guy that has receiver traits, but plays the tight end position, has the size of a tight end. It has not come to be a dominant force in the NFL yet. And I think a lot of that comes down to teams and offenses and coordinators simply don't know how to deploy him because maybe we kind of misjudged his ability to play tight end in the NFL. Like, potentially, is he just not good enough at the nitty-gritty tight end things of blocking, right? Teams do not take him seriously as a proper tight end. Now, obviously, that has not really hurt a guy like Travis Kelce, so there's more issues here than just that. But maybe he's more of a linear athlete than we would have thought. Maybe he's just not quite the player that we thought. But there have been a lot of different issues. The quarterback play, the offensive scheming, the inability to find ways to put him in a situation to succeed. Those all come outside of Kyle Pitts. But when we're talking about somebody that's supposed to be generational, he has yet to even be a really good player in the league, right? Talent does not equal production, and that's a lot of what Kyle Pitts' story has been. His fantasy finishes have been 10th as a rookie, 33rd in year number 2, and then he was tight end number 13. So if you were just taking fantasy production to display how good a tight end is, he has yet to be a top 9 or 8 tight end in the league. Just if you base tight end play off of fantasy production. He has one 1,000-yard season, and he has yet to have a year with 70 catches. Very disappointing and very overrated. Ronnie Stanley is my selection for the Baltimore Ravens. Ronnie Stanley is a case where at one time he was a very good player and perhaps even underrated and very elite for his position. But because he plays offensive line, many people that don't really follow the NFL at the same rate as you or I potentially will still see Ronnie Stanley as the guy he was a few years ago instead of the guy that he is now. And when you dive a little bit deeper into Ronnie Stanley, you see a guy that has never played a full season in his career. He's played 24 games in the last 2 seasons, which is obviously an average of 12 games a year when teams are playing 17 in the regular season. He has been graded in those games as the 37th best tackle at, his position, left and right tackle, 37th in the last 2 years, both back-to-back seasons. So it's not like last year he was the 10th best tackle according to PFF, and this year he was the 24th. No, he has been 37th, right? So that is not even a number 1 tackle standard. If we're taking left tackle and right tackle, it would be the top 32 tackles in the league, right? He is below that standard. So for a player that used to be elite and is still well-renowned for his ability to play tackle in the NFL and viewed as a highly paid pass blocker, a blindside protector. He has simply not been that guy. Last year, he allowed 5 sacks. He allowed 42 pressures. And the injuries have caught up to Ronnie Stanley at a rate where he has just not been able to get his consistency and his form back to what it used to be. So Ronnie Stanley is my selection for the Baltimore Ravens. Von Miller is the obvious pick for the Buffalo Bills. Von Miller is a Hall of Famer, and in my opinion, Von Miller at his best is one of the best pass rushers in NFL history. But that is not what Von Miller is anymore. He was an absolute disaster last season. Now, a lot of people would just chalk it up to his off-the-field antics, as well as maybe the injury that he had previously. But still, he played 12 games for the Bills, which you probably didn't even know because you couldn't notice him. He had 0 sacks and 3 tackles in 12 games. That is atrocious. Like, I know wide receivers that had more tackles, probably Patriots receivers, that had more tackles in this season than Von Miller. Okay? Like, there were specialists that had double the tackles than Von Miller this year. There were probably specialists that had more sacks than Von Miller this year. Like, that is how bad Von Miller was this season. So, yes, he was paid big time to come in and put the Bills over the top. He was good in year 1. He got injured, major injury, Achilles injury, I believe. And then he has just never been the same. Plus, he had the off-the-field stuff. So, Von Miller used to be great. Hall of Fame player. And I still think he'll get that jacket, but right now, he is not anywhere near that name that he used to be known for. Ekwonu. Icky is my selection for the Carolina Panthers. 11 sacks. 11 sacks allowed in 2023. This was the 6th overall pick in 2022. This guy was viewed as a future stud at the tackle position. He has allowed 11 sacks in a single season last year. I mean, you just expect a lot more from a player that is drafted that highly at the tackle position. He hasn't been a bad run blocker, but as a pass blocker, he's been a borderline disaster. And a major reason Bryce Young was really having a tough time as a rookie quarterback because his blindside protector, his left tackle, could not block and got him sacked 11 times. So, at least according to PFF's numbers, he was one of the worst tackles in the NFL at allowing sacks. You just expect a lot more out of that 6th overall pick from a couple of years ago. Caleb Williams. I know he's a rookie. He hasn't played a single snap in the NFL, but I still think he's overrated. I'm not saying Caleb Williams is going to be bad. I'm not saying Caleb Williams is not going to be great. But the way that people are talking about Caleb Williams, especially Nick Wright, they need to see a doctor because he has not played a single snap. And a majority of NFL rookie quarterbacks struggle. Despite having a great receiving core around him, I still feel Caleb is going to struggle with certain things. His reliance on off-script production, his reliance on ad-libbing, that is going to really get him in trouble. He's loose with the football at times. He needs to learn how to play a proper, structured quarterback style. If he can do that, he can be a very good quarterback. The other thing is, he's a little bit smaller in terms of height. Right? He's got the lower half to sustain like Russell Wilson and break tackles. But the height isn't ideal either. And then you have to talk about the hype. The hype is outrageous. The hype is massive. The hype is quote unquote generational. And when you're labeled with that tag, you have no choice but to put this guy on an overrated list. It's not even me saying he won't be good. But I mean, I'd be surprised genuinely if he was a top 15 quarterback as a rookie. I would. So that's me saying that people that are saying he's going to be a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the league right away, that is overrating this kid. Because that's really hard to do. Sam Hubbard is my selection for the Cincinnati Bengals. Sam Hubbard had perhaps his least productive season of his NFL career this past season, and nobody really noticed, which is why I also wanted to put him on this list. He was 77th ranked at the edge position according to PFF this year, 85th in pass rush grade, and 64th in run defense grade. He's been a very steady all-around end for a majority of his career in Cincinnati, especially in run defense and setting the edge, and he was not able to do that this year, coupling with only 6 sacks, which was the lowest total of his career since 2020. That, speaks to how he was not playing at the same level last year and how he is a little bit overrated. A lot of people hear the name Sam Hubbard. They rather know him from Ohio State. They know him from the Super Bowl run of the Bengals. They know him from the steady play that he's provided on the opposite side of Trey Hendrickson. But last year, he wasn't good in really any facet. Run defense, pass rushing, his PRP, which is a statistic that judges, the average ability to get after the quarterback in terms of the rate that a pass rusher is able to put pressure on a quarterback, was only a 5.9, which ranked 106th in the league according to PFF. So he was just very, very, very below average in terms of a starting defensive end. You'd ideally want both of your ends to rank in the top 64, right? And Sam Hubbard, 77th. 85th as a pass rusher. And he was kind of, to me, always known as a top 40 player at his position. Maybe a top 35 player at his position. But this past year, he's been half of that player. So, yeah, very disappointing season last year. Hopefully he can bounce back this season. Jerry Jeudy is my pick for the Cleveland Browns. This one was very easy. This is just another guy, a jag, according to Steve Smith. And when Steve Smith says that about a receiver, you have to take notice. Jerry Jeudy has just never lived up to his high expectations coming out of Alabama as an exquisite and natural route runner. People hyped him up to the moon with just his movement skills and his ability to release off the line of scrimmage. But I was never buying into Jerry Jeudy hype at that level. I was more of a CeeDee Lamb fan. I had him as my number 1 receiver. I had Justin Jefferson as my number 2 receiver. And I'm proud of that to this day, although I probably should have had Jefferson number 1, but that's besides the point. Jerry Jeudy is, where would you really rank him in his draft class? It wouldn't be that high. And he's more, to me, a number 3, a high-end number 3, a very low-end number 2 right now in his career. Last year, he had a 54 catch, 758, 2-touchdown season. He only has 11 total touchdowns in 4 seasons in the NFL, and he graded 62nd in 2023 at the receiver position, which would mean he is a low-end number 2 receiver, as I said. Last year, he actually had a pretty good year in 2022, but he has not been able to maintain any consistency, any health, any rhythm, and he's just overall been a guy that has been known for his draft status and his potential, but has never been able to live up to that potential. Maybe he will in Cleveland with a fresh start, but I just don't see the explosiveness in his game. I feel like his hands have been inconsistent. He's not the most physical guy in the world. There are aspects to his game that I think went overlooked and misjudged throughout the draft process that have caught up to him in the NFL. Next, Dak Prescott for the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott actually had probably his best season of his career last year, so it is difficult to put Dak Prescott on this list, but at the same time, I feel like he's a pretty divisive player. I think that Prescott at times has been a top 10 quarterback in this league, maybe even a top 7 or 8 quarterback in this league. But then there's far too many moments in big games where he just disappoints. We've seen it regularly in the playoffs throughout his tenure in Dallas. And this is to say that Dak has had really good teams. Dak has had really good receivers for the most part. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup at a time, right? He's had really good running games led by Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. He's had excellent offensive lines with 2 Hall of Famers, Tyron Smith and Zach Martin. He's had really good defenses in these last few years with Micah Parsons leading the way. But to me, Dak has never been able to uplift his team and really give his team the edge in the big game. Be that elite player that carries his team. He is more of a very good player that is a product to me of playing with a lot of other good players for a majority of his career. He has, and what's perhaps the most frustrating thing about Dak is that he has moments of looking like an elite player. There are games that you can point to say, wow, he was very good in this game. He looked like Mahomes would, or Josh would, or Burrow would, or Lamar, right? He looked in that category, but he's unable to sustain it for long stretches and periods of seasons. Last year, again, he had the best season of his career according to PFF, 4th ranked at the position. But otherwise, he has never been better than 7th, according to PFF grade. And that would line up also with my quarterback rankings throughout his career. And he's 2-5 in the playoffs. And this past year, to speak to why he's actually overrated, they had him as 2nd team All-Pro behind the MVP Lamar Jackson and 2nd in MVP votes, which I disagree with both of those notions. I don't think he was more valuable to his team than Josh Allen this year. Lamar Jackson, sure, you could say he won the MVP. Was he more valuable to his team, Dak Prescott, than Josh Allen? I would say no. And then even you could say, other positions. Was he more valuable than Tyreek Hill was to Miami or Christian McCaffrey was to the 49ers? Did he even really deserve more votes than Brock Purdy? Right? Last year, obviously, he's not a better player than Mahomes, but when you speak to statistics, he obviously was better last year. But to me, it's last year's acclaim does not match what Dak actually is. He's not the 2nd best quarterback in the league. To me, he's not a top 5 quarterback in the league. So I think that his season last year kind of inflated what people think of him overall, because I think overall he's about a top 7 or 8 quarterback. Maybe not even that at times in his career, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that. But I just like to see more big game moments, more playoff wins, more playoff success. That would bring me a lot more faith in Dak Prescott. Javonte Williams is my pick for the Denver Broncos, grading 51st at the running back position in 2023 and carrying the football at a 3.6 yards per carry rate in 2023. So in neither regard is that very good. He was not very productive on the ground or consistent or efficient on the ground and did not grade out well either. He's not very dynamic, not very fast, not a game breaker. He's more known for a power style. He's dealt with a lot of injuries and inconsistency on and off the field in terms of his availability. And at times I felt like guys that were behind him, like P. Ryan and McLaughlin, looked like better players than him when they were in at the same time. So Javonte is known for his draft status, known by fantasy football circles as a really, promising young player, but has never really lived up to that potential. Denver does not have a lot of candidates for this overrated position here, but Javonte would be the one that I would circle. Jameson Williams is my pick for the Detroit Lions, and this largely comes from fantasy football right now, where a lot of people are expecting Jameson Williams to have a blockbuster, huge breakout season. But as a Jameson Williams fan coming into the NFL out of the draft, I've just seen absolutely zero, nothing for me to indicate that I believe that's going to happen. Do I believe he's going to get opportunity? Do I believe he's playing in a good offense? Do I believe he can fly? He's very fast, yes. But there's something missing with him. He feels very one-dimensional, almost like a vertical threat and not much else. You can hand the ball off to him on a reverse like they did in the NFC Championship, and he does have a lot of speed. But man, just the nuance of his game, the consistency, the physicality of his game, it feels like he is needing a free release at times, needing to be only a vertical threat. He doesn't have a lot of dimension to his game or versatility to his game. So he's still missing many things, and overall just a proven factor for me to really buy into his, not a resurgence, but a breakout in 2024. I just don't see how that's possible with what I've currently seen from Jameson Williams. Eric Stokes is my pick for the Green Bay Packers, a first-round pick not too long ago. He has 1 interception in 28 career games as a corner that was drafted in the first round. That's pretty pathetic in my opinion. He has only played 12 games in the last 2 seasons, and he hasn't been good either. If you look up his PFF grades or his coverage stats, neither look pretty impressive. He's never been a good number 2 corner to Jair, and he's never been consistently on the field enough for us to actually feel like he's been good, right? Maybe in his rookie year, there was moments where you looked at him and you said, this guy could be something. But other than that, he's just getting injured too much. He's not getting ball production. So, yeah, Eric Stokes, like, people kind of think of the Packers secondary and they're like, oh, they got Alexander, they got Stokes. And I know I've thought that way before, but that hasn't really been the case. We don't really know how good Stokes is. So that's why he's overrated. Stephon Diggs, this might be controversial, is my selection for the Houston Texans. And I overall tried to avoid new players to new teams because it's kind of a tricky situation. But I'd like to dive a little bit into the Stephon Diggs conversation. So last season, Stephon Diggs was graded as the 21st best receiver in the NFL, which is certainly not bad. That's very good, right? That's that's still a number one receiver in football. That's not exactly a top 20, but pretty close, right? But it's not what it used to be. You know, Diggs has been widely regarded as a top 5 or 7 receiver, maybe even top 3 throughout the majority of his time in Buffalo. And he significantly dropped off from that point. That was his worst grade, a PFF grade, since 2016. So this is the worst Stephon Diggs we've ever seen now that he's nearing 30 years old. He had the least amount of yards in a season since 2019, which was, I believe, pre-Buffalo and Josh Allen. And then when you look at his stats this past season from week 8 on, and you look at the regression and you look at the downfall and the slope of his game, sure, some of it was phasing him out of the offense and changing the identity of the offense. But for your number one receiver in 8 games to only have 349 yards and 9.4 yards per reception with only 1 touchdown, that speaks to this player potentially not being a number one receiver anymore. Do I still think Diggs can be a number 2? Sure. Do I think he'd thrive as a number 3 with Tank Dell and Nico Collins? Absolutely. I still love the pickup for Houston specifically. But I think as a number 1 bona fide stud, he deserves to be in your top 10 wide receiver rankings. Diggs does not belong there anymore, in my opinion. He has certainly gotten worse. Anthony Richardson is my pick for the Indianapolis Colts, and there's no real reasoning other than the fact that there is a group of fans that I think stems from the fantasy football space as well as what he did at the NFL Combine, believing in the freakish nature of his physical traits, that people are basically projecting Anthony Richardson for Cam Newton, Jalen Hurts-like production, and that's just very difficult to ask. Like, sure, could his season look pretty good statistically, but not be great in real life? Yeah, we've seen that from Justin Fields before, right? Like, that's been beneficial to fantasy owners. But overall, I don't know if we've seen enough tape, if we've seen enough production, if we've seen enough from Anthony Richardson to exactly know that he's going to be a stud. And so many people are willing to go out on a limb, and smart people are willing to go out on a limb and hype him to the moon and say the Colts are going to make the playoffs. Well, in order for the Colts to make the playoffs in that division, in this conference, Anthony Richardson's going to have to be darn good. And I just don't know if we've got enough, information on that yet. So I definitely feel like out of all the players on the Colts, Anthony Richardson has gotten the most hype, and it's really not deserved. I mean, he barely played in college football, and he's barely played in the pros. There's just not a lot of evidence that Anthony Richardson is a great player yet. Trevor Lawrence is my pick for the Jacksonville Jags. Notice a trend, a lot of quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are one of the most overrated, just overall group of players are overrated because they're the most important position and everybody evaluates quarterbacks. So certain guys are definitely going to be overrated, and Trevor Lawrence is one of those players in my opinion. When you don't look at the film and you turn off your brain and you say, okay, what are the results for Trevor Lawrence so far? Because there are players, or not players, but there are people, there are analysts, there are NFL fans that will watch Trevor Lawrence highlights, that will watch Trevor Lawrence's high moments, best moments, film, and will look at him in certain games and say, wow, look at this throw, or look at that arm strength, or look at that release, or look at how he avoided pressure there. And they'll fall in love with the physical ability of Trevor Lawrence. But the actual production of Trevor Lawrence for a player that was named a generational talent, the next Andrew Luck, the next Peyton Manning, a guy that was crowned from freshman season at Clemson on, he has been mid at best. You look at his production, 15th graded quarterback in 2023. He's not a top 10 quarterback. And I would actually argue he's not a top 10 talent at the position either. Maybe that's controversial, but I don't think his brain is there. I don't think that his arm angles and manipulation of the football in terms of that is there. I think his accuracy and his mechanics are a little off at times. I think his talent is overrated, and I think his production is certainly overrated. 15th graded QB this past year, which is mid. 20-30 overall record as a starter for a generational talent that is not good enough. He has thrown 58 touchdowns to 39 picks. That's not very good in the modern NFL. And only an 85 passer rating. If you were to just compare those numbers, and you can do this for yourself, to Mac Jones, you would probably make an argument that Mac Jones has been a better quarterback in the NFL than Trevor Lawrence, just based on numbers alone. And that's disappointing when we're talking about Trevor Lawrence. So certainly an overrated player right now. Not saying he could not become a good player or a very steady, very good quarterback, but right now he is overrated. Jawan Taylor is my pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City doesn't have too many overrated players, in my opinion, actually, but Jawan Taylor's the one that sticks out. You know, he was paid a massive contract to come in and replace Orlando Brown, and he actually plays the opposite position of right tackle, but you look at what he's become and what he produces for the Chiefs this past year. 59 pressures this season was the most in the entire NFL for any tackle. Okay, it was tied for the most. He did play more snaps than pretty much 99% of tackles because they went to the Super Bowl, but 59 pressures, the most in the NFL for a player that is paid the way Jawan Taylor is, that is not very good. Okay. He allowed 12 hits this season, which is the fourth most in the NFL. He allowed the third most hurries to Patrick Mahomes this season. That is pretty bad, right? Third most in the entire NFL, and a 42.6 run block grade this year. He's not a good run blocker and never has been. His grades were not very good in Jacksonville, and Kansas City still kind of decided to go with the talent over the substance and the production. And Taylor has proven to be not a very good player in Kansas City either, leading the NFL in pressures allowed. So yeah, he's overrated. Tyree Wilson is my pick for the Las Vegas Raiders. Tyree Wilson is more of like, okay, how much was it the injury that he came into the NFL with? How much of it was he's just a raw player and he's going to grow and get better? And I could see both of those instances being true. But I couldn't really find a case for anyone else. The only other guy I kind of thought of on the Raiders was Davante Adams. But I honestly don't think Davante Adams is all that overrated. I just think his quarterback play has kind of been bad. But when it comes to Tyree Wilson, 3.5 sacks as a rookie. You know, he was a top 10 pick as a pass rusher. You expect better. You expect more out of that freaky talent that Tyree Wilson is. 3.5 sacks. He wasn't even really a starter for the Raiders. He was more of a rotation player, and he was injured, you know. So just has not lived up to the hype yet, but it's only been one season, so we'll see. Derwin James is my pick for the Chargers. This one might be surprising because a lot of people, you know, if you haven't really paid attention to Derwin James as of late, a lot of people would say he's maybe the best safety in the league or one of the best safeties in the league. But this past season, he did not play that way. He was 71st in PFF grade, and he was 76th in coverage grade. His ball production in terms of interceptions, his ability to create big plays in terms of forced fumbles and sacks were not at the same level as we've seen recently. You know, he did play a little bit out of position, it felt like, this past season more than other seasons. But overall, the rhythm of his game and the consistency of his game for Derwin James has not been at the level that we expected. Last year, he was very good. He was phenomenal at times. This past year, nowhere near that same player. So I think Derwin James is overrated. I could have went also with Joey Bosa just for the injuries, but I think Bosa is more injury-based, while James actually played this year, but just did not play up to his standard. Tre'Davious White is my pick for the Los Angeles Rams. White is a name, right? Like, Tre'Davious White used to be one of the best corners in the league. So when Rams fans sign Tre'Davious White, they're going to get super amped and super excited about it. But they have to understand that Tre'Davious White is not the same player. He's had multiple Achilles injuries throughout the course of his career. He does not run the same. He cannot really play man coverage, and he's strictly a zone player. And even then, we don't know how good he is because he's only played 10 games in the last 2 seasons. Is he still a number 1 corner? Probably not. Can he be a productive number 2? Perhaps. Does he still have that upside in his game? I don't know, right? Like, Tre'Davious White is all what he's done in the past, and it's been a few seasons, since Tre'Davious White played at an elite level. So that certainly makes him overrated in terms of his name. Odell Beckham Jr. is my pick for the Miami Dolphins. I'm a fan of OBJ, always have been, always will be. I know many of you are as well, but facts of the matter suggest that OBJ is nowhere near the same player that he used to be, even when he was in Los Angeles with the Rams or the Cleveland Browns. Not even talking about New York Giants Odell Beckham, which might have been one of the most explosive, one of the most fun to watch, one of the best primes I've ever seen from any receiver in the NFL history of the game. And if it were not for injuries, I think Odell would still be a very good player. But the thing with Odell is the injuries, right? And they have significantly slowed him down to the point where, yeah, he actually graded pretty well, like 32nd best receiver in the league. That's pretty good last year, but then you kind of think about the production, you think about his contract last year where he pretty much robbed the Ravens blind on that contract, and you think about, okay, he hasn't had 1,000 yards since 2019, which is like 5 years ago. 2021, he was a good player, but he was like a number 2 receiver to Cooper Kupp, and he was important in their playoff run, but I mean, he was more of a number 2 kind of complementary piece. And now he's a role player. I mean, that's what he is. He's not a number 2. He's not a number 1. Like, people think of him, with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and they say, Odell, well, that's crazy. That's like Tyreek's number 1, and Jalen could be a number 1, and Odell's like a good number 2. No, that's not the case. It's like Tyreek's the number 1. Jalen is probably a number 1, but he is the number 2. And Odell is like a role player. He'll play a few snaps every game, give you a couple of catches, but he's not what he used to be, right? He's not the same explosive threat. He doesn't really play the same amount of snaps. He's not going to be that guy after the catch that he used to be. So, yeah, Odell, he's one of the biggest names in the NFL, one of the most popular players in the NFL, but he's certainly overrated. Harrison Smith is my pick for the Minnesota Vikings. This is just one that comes down to age. Harrison Smith is just not the same player he used to be, and that just happens, right? He's older. And you could say that he was the 3rd best safety on his team. At least that's what PFF would say. The 3rd highest graded safety on the Vikings last year, grading 34th by PFF, which is not bad at all. He played over 1,000 snaps, still plays at a high level as a box safety, right? Can play free or strong safety. But Metellus and Bynum are very underrated players that play safety as well, a little bit of nickel, and they graded higher than Harrison Smith. So I think everybody would mostly say Harrison Smith's the best safety on the Vikings. And PFF grade doesn't really mean that he necessarily isn't. But I think what this does tell us is that he's nowhere near the player he used to be. He's nowhere near Harrison Smith of like 2017, right? He's nowhere near that player. He's nowhere near a top 10 safety anymore. He's nowhere near even really a top 20 safety anymore. He's a good player. He's still a productive player that you want on your team, but he's not the Harrison Smith. For the New England Patriots, I have Juju Smith-Schuster, and this was an easy one as a Patriots fan. Juju is one of the biggest names on the Patriots roster currently, but I would arguably suggest that he might be cut. Like, that's how bad he is at this point. I don't think people really know or have recognized how bad Juju has been on New England because people don't really watch the Patriots as much anymore, so they don't really get a feel for him, but he was nowhere near their best receiver, which is what he was expected to be. He was expected to replace and actually be an upgrade over Jacoby Myers, but his knee injury and his knee injuries and his knees in general have just completely crippled his ability to be a productive and athletic and explosive player. And he is just none of those things. 1 touchdown last year, 9 yards per reception, 260 yards. And really, when you look at Juju, He's had one good year since 2020. One good year. And that was the year with Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the league. So when he has not been with Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes in a contract year where he's working for a new contract to get paid to go to New England, he's been really bad. Especially with the Patriots, where he looked slow, like he had no juice at all, and his career could be over in short order, in my opinion. For the New Orleans Saints, Alvin Kamara is their most overrated player. 51st, 32nd, and 26th. That's his running back PFF grade since 2020. He has not been a 25 or better, top 25 running back in the NFL, according to PFF, in 4 years. And, even people like James White, who brought up Alvin Kamara as one of his favorite running backs to watch, which I totally understand from James White's perspective, because James White is James White, a receiving running back legend of that position, and Alvin Kamara is a legend of the receiving running back position as well. And when he was watching Kamara, he was a different breed. He was a top 5, top 10 running back in the NFL. But really, ever since Drew Brees retired, this has not been the same player. He has definitely lost a step in terms of explosiveness. He does not make people miss at the same rate. He's never really been a great short yardage threat. He's always been about stop, start, and vision and explosiveness, and he doesn't have that ability anymore. And that speaks in the numbers. Like, it really tells the story. 3.9 yards per rush, right? And 6.2 yards per reception. Neither of those numbers are acceptable for a good running back. So I don't care what your offensive line is or what your quarterback position is. If you have 6.2 yards per reception, you can't even get 7 yards on a catch. That's disgusting. And then 3.9 yards per rush, that's not good enough. You expect 4 or above from a good running back. So Alvin Kamara, overrated. Kayvon Thibodeau is my pick for the New York Giants. This one I think will be controversial for Giants fans because he had a lot of sacks last year. But when you actually dive deeper into Kayvon Thibodeau as a player, you look at things like his PFF grade, his pressure numbers, his actual win rate, things like that dive deeper into the player that he is on a per snap basis. Kayvon Thibodeau is nowhere near those sack numbers. And that's what worries me a little bit. I also kind of think that Burns, as of late, has been a little bit overrated and maybe did not deserve the contract that he got from the Giants. But Thibodeau, to me, is more of a guy that is going to be feasting off of others around him, and he's not necessarily a one-on-one game wrecker that he was drafted to be, where he was drafted to be, right? So you have to think of the name that he was coming out of college, the production he's actually had so far, which has been good in terms of sacks, but not necessarily his play-to-play ability has been very high. So to me, he's just not a great player on a consistent basis. He has flashes, but he's not overall a great player. Aaron Rodgers from the New York Jets is my pick. This one's easy, right? Aaron Rodgers is an all-time quarterback, arguably a top 5 quarterback of all time. There's very little debate that he is a top 10 quarterback of all time and will get a gold jacket once he retires, right? One day from now, he will get a Hall of Fame jacket. And he deserves that appraise, that acclaim, all that stuff, right? But Aaron Rodgers, the last time he suited up and played an NFL season for a team, let's just strip it away, right? Let's not think about the Achilles. I'm not even talking about the Achilles. I'm not even talking about the fact that he's injured. I'm talking about the fact that people think Aaron Rodgers is going to enter the NFL once again, and he's going to be Aaron Rodgers from 2020 or 2021 or 2022. And to me, Aaron Rodgers, the last time we saw him, was the worst Aaron Rodgers we've ever seen. This was pre-Achilles. He went 8-9 as a starter on a team that Jordan Love took to the divisional round and nearly beat the NFC champion, the San Francisco 49ers, in their building, a team that Rodgers could never beat, right? 8-9 with 3,600 yards, which is a very low number. I mean, Tom Brady threw for 3,600 yards in 2001 as a rookie, okay? Basically a rookie. And the worst passer rating of his entire career, 2022 Aaron Rodgers. So we're expecting that Aaron Rodgers, 3,600 yards, 8-9 record, I think it was a 24-12 touchdown interception ratio, and the worst passer rating of his career. To come off an Achilles with a pretty below average offensive coordinator, and I guess a good supporting cast, no doubt, better than Green Bay. But we're expecting greatness. We're expecting MVP. We're expecting top 5 quarterback. We're expecting top 10 quarterback even. That's overrated. Like, he is not that good anymore. He was not that good in 2022. He was like a top 20 quarterback the last time he played. And if he's a top 20 quarterback for the Jets, I still think that's going to make them a lot better, which is why I'm confident the Jets will be a good team if he stays healthy, that is. But that is also not what people expect. People expect top 10 play from Aaron Rodgers. I'm sorry to say, this is not Tom Brady, right? Aaron Rodgers is not built like that. I don't think he can play at 44, 45 and be that player. So we'll see. James Bradberry is definitely the most overrated player on the Philadelphia Eagles. 100th. I can't even say it correctly. In PFF grade last year. 106th in coverage grade. He allowed a 114 passer rating and a league lead and a league low 10 touchdowns allowed. 13.1 yards per reception. It's just as plain as day that James Bradberry was being picked on by every single NFL quarterback and offense and team and coordinator and all of the above. Like, he was atrocious last year. Drew Lock made him look like a CFL player. He is not good anymore. Justin Fields is the most overrated player on the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's weird to have a backup quarterback as the most overrated player, but there's still, and I mean still, a legion of Bears fans that believe they should have, not drafted Caleb Williams and his potential. And don't take me putting Caleb Williams on this list as a submission of that, right? Don't do that, okay? But Justin Fields has been overrated his entire career. A lot of it is the aesthetic. Justin Fields looks like a great athlete. He is a great athlete. He runs well. He's got a cannon, right? He's got the visor. He was good at Ohio State, had a great legacy there. But when it came to NFL play and NFL production, Justin Fields was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league as a starter. Right? This is a player that has won 10 games in 38 starts. That is horrible. That is atrocious. At one time, he was leading the NFL in sack percentage and sacks because he takes way too many sacks. Fumbles. He fumbles way too much. He's slow-minded. He can't really read the field. He needs to be in an exact schematic offense that is easy for him to read, that utilizes his legs, that utilizes his arm strength to go vertical in the offense. That's why he could fit Pittsburgh pretty well and Arthur Smith pretty well. But there's a reason the Bears gave up on him. Steelers fans, I wouldn't be too ecstatic. This is a guy that they want to make a kick returner, not a quarterback. So still overrated, Justin Fields. Javon Hargrave is my pick for the San Francisco 49ers. This was actually a really hard team to choose from because all of their great players are still very, very good. The only other one I even considered was Deebo Samuel, but when you look deeper into Deebo's numbers, he was still excellent last year and still led the NFL in things like yards after catch and stuff like that. So it's hard to put Deebo in this conversation, although I do think he's slowing down subtly. But Javon Hargrave was just not quite what was expected from him in terms of the money that they gave him, right? And I think there's one key area that he was very disappointing, which was run defense, which we've always known Javon Hargrave is not the greatest run defender. But when you are paid the way that Javon Hargrave is, which is basically a top 5 D tackle in the NFL, and you do produce well as a pass rusher, but you're very bad in run defense, which was a big issue for the 49ers all year, he was the worst run defense grade of any of the top 35 graded defensive tackles among all of PFF's top 35. He had the lowest running defense grade, okay? So that just speaks to his inconsistency and his lack of balance in his game. He's a very disruptive pass rusher, but his run defense is sloppy. So as a player that's paid the way he is, you would expect more well-roundedness, and Hargrave does not give the same well-rounded game that other players at his position at a high level like Quinnen Williams, Dexter Lawrence do. Jackson Smith-Njigba was my pick for the Seahawks. This one is interesting because I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is sort of like Jerry Jeudy. And allow me to explain. I think he's a slot player that moves, his quickness, his route running, his sharp cuts make people very excited for the future of his game. But I also never feel like Jackson Smith-Njigba will ever be a number one receiver, which is why I didn't have him as my favorite receiver in the draft last year, and I had Zay Flowers. Because I don't see that upper echelon talent. I see a very productive slot player that could catch a lot of passes in seasons, and I think that's coming for him in his career. But I think this is a player with 63 catches, 628 yards, 10 yards per reception last year. He was expected to be the best rookie receiver among all rookie receivers, and he ranked 10th for rookies in yards. Okay, so 10th. That's not good enough. That was below Dalton Kincaid, right, at tight end. That was below, obviously, Sam Laporta at tight end. But that was below, some names that you wouldn't have expected, like Josh Downs, okay? And I would even argue, like, when he played and when I watched them player for player, Demario Douglas was just as good as Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, just disappointing overall rookie season. He is working his way back to NFL shape, to NFL form, to football form because he's had injuries in college as well. I'd expect better in the future, but he's just not a very explosive player. I think the way that he plays is just not as valuable as you would lead, his potential. Some people think he's going to be better than he probably is going to be and more valuable, right? So that's why I have Jackson Smith-Njigba on the overrated list. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is my selection for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's just never lived up to being the next Shaq Barrett or Jason Pierre-Paul as he was drafted to become in Tampa Bay for Todd Bowles' defense as a first-round pick. I believe in 2020, the year after they won the Super Bowl, I think he was the first-round pick. He's never had more than 5 sacks in 3 seasons and 26 pressures, which that ranks 78th in the NFL. So he's not a number 1 pass rusher. He's not barely a number 2, if that. He's more of like a number 3 rotation rusher, a guy that's never had 6 sacks in a season. So his draft status, his, role that they had in mind for him, he's never lived up to that. And when you watch him, he just never really has a dominant outing. He never really has moments where he really looks great or like the potential is ever really going to happen for him. He looks like an athletic guy that can't really put it together. So Joe Tryon is my pick for Tampa Bay. For the Tennessee Titans, I'm going with Tony Pollard, which might be controversial because I think Tony Pollard could have days ahead of him that are better than last year, because last year I think was crippled more than we would have thought by the Achilles injury that he suffered against San Francisco in the playoffs the year previously. But he was the 15th graded running back, which is actually higher than I would have thought last year because his production was not great, right? He only had 4 yards per carry. He was a volume running back that caught a lot of passes but was not very efficient. He ran the ball a lot, but he was not very efficient. He was a lead horse for a team that had Zeke for a number of years, and you expected with Tony Pollard being the lead back after multiple seasons of being a top 5 efficiency running back in football, sometimes the most, electric runner that we saw in the NFL weekly on Sundays, that once he got the lead role, he would be just one of the best elite players at this position, and that's just not what happened. So that's why Dallas moved on from him and he became a Tennessee Titan. I think he's a solid running back, don't get me wrong, but I'm not like super amped that he's on the Titans. And if I'm a Titans fan, I wouldn't be all that shocked if Tajay Spears became the starter, because I think Pollard, there is a chance that the Achilles injury, he's just never going to be that same player he was in 2022 or 2021. So that's why I have Tony Pollard on this list. And the final overrated player, our second rookie, Jaden Daniels, for the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are viewed as one of the worst rosters and teams in the NFL, so it's really hard for me to pick an overrated player. But if I were to pick one, I would say that a majority of the NFL community thinks of Jaden Daniels a lot higher than I do. So that's why he's on this list. I view him as, at best, an average starter in the NFL, while I think many people will view him as better than Drake May, maybe even better than Caleb Williams. There were those takes on YouTube and throughout the community. There's going to be a lot of people that like him in fantasy football because he can run a lot, right? He's a really, really athletic quarterback. But I have many issues with him in terms of arm strength, in terms of the system, the spread system he played in. I think he's very limited at extending plays. He's a good runner, but he's not a great extender through passing the football. And I worry about things like him getting hurt by too many big hits, pocket presence, things of that nature. I'm not saying he'll be a bad player. I still see things that I like rhythm, timing, accuracy, mechanics, and his speed. But I do think that there are a lot of people that think he's way better than I think he is. So that's why he's on this list. Well, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Those are the most overrated NFL players entering 2024. Remember, 100 likes on this video, I'll give you the breakout player for all 32 teams in my next BLV breakdown. Thanks for watching. It's Mitch. Peace.